Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we're heading north to Los Angeles. And this week's topics, I'm really excited. One of my favorite subjects is documentaries. We're going to be talking documentaries, field production. We're going to discuss doing deep dives for research. Our guest this week is Cami Buckman. She works on documentaries these days with an emphasis on historical studies. She attended San Diego State from 2014 through 2018. Previously, she worked for the Los Angeles Times as an assistant video editor and producer. She also worked on a very popular YouTube channel, Johnny Harris's channel, as a story producer. Most recently, she was involved in a fascinating project called Hustlers, Gamblers, and Crooks. She's a freelancer, and fortunately, we have time in her busy schedule for her to join us. Cami, welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. How's it going?
It is excellent. I mean, I'm already excited whenever I get to record one of these, but especially documentaries. I love all documentaries. I love true crime. I love history. I love it when people explain complex things to me. I love documentaries about video games and sports and movies. What do you like about documentaries? What fires you up about this particular form of journalism, Cami?
Oh my God. I think I was always drawn to documentaries because they can be artistic. You know, it's all of the best parts of journalism, but you can be more creative and you can be artistic and you can take your time with people. I mean, I'm like you, I'm interested in so many different things. I often struggled in journalism to find like a beat. And I beat myself up about it because I couldn't find this niche, but then I realized that's okay. I'm just one of those people who's curious about everything. And so I think, that's what I've always loved about documentaries is you can zoom in as far and as close as you want to in a story. There's a documentary for everyone. Truly, scroll through Netflix. There's a story about everything these days. Yeah, I'm like you. I love documentaries, all of them.
So you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to work in documentaries. At least I wouldn't think so. So let's kind of rewind back to why you first started at journalism, why you picked San Diego State, maybe what you thought as a freshman that you were going to do with your life.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of an anomaly in that when I was a little kid, I came home from school and instead of watching SpongeBob, I loved the Oprah Show. I loved Oprah, but I loved specifically this journalist on Oprah named Lisa Ling. For some reason, as an 8-year-old, I really gravitated toward Lisa Ling and I loved the stories she did. And she did these investigative news segments on Oprah, looking into puppy mills and this and that, and just, various aspects of society. And I think my mom put it in my head, you should be an investigative journalist like Lisa Ling someday. And I was like, sure, sounds great. I'll be that and a volleyball player and an artist and a paleontologist, like the things you do when you're a kid. But, entering high school and really thinking about it, I was like, oh, no, I do want to do this. I want to do this journalism thing. I want to do this kind of slower, in-depth take into stories. And it just always stayed with me. So going into college, I still had that same interest into journalism, but specifically like the Lisa Ling kind of profiles of documentaries. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to take the journalism path toward it rather than film school. I think I wanted the background and the base of journalism and ethics and writing. And then I wanted to try and pivot my way over into documentary, which I'm still doing today. But as far as why SDSU, to be perfectly honest, I didn't get accepted anywhere else. And so, in high school, I was definitely the kind of student that wasn't overachiever. I took the hard classes. I had very high expectations for myself. And I think when you're a student like I was, and you know what you think you want to do, you Google best journalism school, best business school, and then you put it in your head, I have to go to this school. And if not, I'll die. And that was me. I was like, I have to go to USC or Northwestern or NYU because those are so easy to get into, and I didn't get accepted to any schools except SDSU and another state school. And, after touring, I was like, okay, SDSU, it has the vibe I want. It's rah, it's big, it's fun. And so I ended up going to San Diego State and no regrets.
So when it comes to, there's this, before you walk, you have to crawl. Before you run, you have to walk. And before you start working on documentaries, you mentioned learning the basics. Tell us about like learning the basics at San Diego State, classes that stood out to you, maybe classmates that stood out to you, just getting your feet wet on the journalism side of understanding, not only do I want to do this, but I really think I could be good at this.
Like I said, I knew I wanted to do journalism, but I always had the aspirations to get into new media, I guess we could call it. I knew I didn't want to be a traditional news anchor or reporter or writer. I knew I kind of wanted to try and pursue different types of storytelling. And so I think SDSU, JMS was great at giving that foundation. And, I find today, I think that's what's given me an edge compared to other people is that I stand out. And this is what people tell me too. I don't know. I don't know what people think when they hire others, but that's what they've told me when they've hired me is that this journalism background has made you stand out from other people. And what it did was give me that background in ethics. It that basic understanding of news writing translates to so many different types of writing as well. That ability to summarize in a lead and that ability to condense. And so, I took that, applied it to these other jobs that I got and these other internships. And I think also because I wanted to take kind of a different path in storytelling, it's what motivated me to be so involved in extracurriculars, to be so involved in the Daily Aztec and KPBS and the San Diego Union Tribune and the department that I was. So yeah, SDSU really helped champion the different kind of journalism that I wanted to try and pursue.
We give a lot of love to the Daily Aztec on this podcast because it deserves a lot of love. It was a big part of my life, a big part of a lot of the guests. But I also noticed that you worked at KCR, and I want to make sure that KCR gets some love too for the experiences that you can get on student radio. Tell us about some of the different ideas that you had that you would do on KCR just to get comfortable with talking into a microphone and coming up with ideas and trying to find some creative outlets.
One thing about me is, yes, I love, news, but I'm also, I also don't take things that seriously. And so luckily I had a friend who wanted to do a radio show with me and we just did weird things. I mean, I wanted this radio show to be like the best parts of myself in that we might talk about current events, but we also did blindfolded taste testing. And, it was just like this reminder to never take things too seriously, and to have fun with it and to never, I guess, be afraid to show who you are in public, on the radio, on YouTube, So yeah, God, we had so much fun on that show. I did it with one of my best friends, Anna Waletzko. And gosh, I can't even remember the things we did. We had themed music days. We chat about different pop culture theories. And then I mentioned we did the taste testing. If I remember correctly, I think we read Craigslist misconnections. We might have done dramatic readings of Craigslist posts. It was just like fun. It was just fun. It was great.
I feel like college radio is basically like what a lot of people did for college radio for like 40 years is kind of what podcasts become now, because you never know who's listening. Most of the time, there's not that many people listening at the beginning anyways of your campus radio station. And so it's just whatever goes, whatever sounds like fun at the time, which is kind of what podcasting has become these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know who monitors college airways, but yeah, it's good stuff. It's fun.
What about Daily Aztec? Give us some of your just like stories that you did, memories that you have where you start to really feel confident in your ability to tell these stories and to interview people and to string together these words that make sense, that have a flow to this narrative that you're trying to tell.
What's so amazing about the Daily Aztec is from the very beginning, you're working. You are a working journalist. Yes, you are a student, but you're still far surpassing what other students are doing. You know, a lot of times you don't really get into the nitty-gritty of storytelling until the end of your college career. Not when you're working for student papers or radio. You're doing it, you're in it, and you're making mistakes and you're learning. And it definitely, I think, puts you ahead of other people in your class and puts you ahead, you know, on your resume. And so I knew immediately with the Daily Aztec, I wanted to write and be involved in video, especially because I wanted to try and pursue a career in video. But I wanted to do it in the arts and culture section. I thought, you know, this is exactly what I want. It's journalism, it's news, it's stories, but I can do profiles on people. I can talk to people. I can get creative. And so that's what I did. And I worked my way up to being the editor my senior year. And you know, it was great because with something like the Daily Aztec, if you have an idea, you do it. There's literally nothing in your way. And I had this idea for a video series called The Daily Aztec Does, because my interests, like Lisa Ling, I was like, well, I want to get out there and I want to do things. I want to immerse myself. And what better place to try and do that and work out the kinks than with your student newspaper. And so I did this video series, and I did it with Adriana, who's been on this podcast. She's incredible. And we worked closely together and kind of dove into many subcultures on campus. I think I did an audio story with the Daily Aztec, and it was at the time when everyone was kind of doing these multimedia stories. And I thought, well, I want to try and do that and pretend to do that. And what better way to make good work than to copy the work that you see and you try to replicate it, right? Like that's the only way you can kind of get better, is to look up to the things, you know, you idolize. And so, yeah, the Daily Aztec, I feel like I owe everything, most of my training, to the Daily Aztec. You in newsrooms, you meet the most eclectic types of people. Truly, in a newsroom, you meet the weirdest people, the coolest, the shyest, the loudest, the most annoying, like every type of person you meet in a newsroom. And that's the same with the Daily Aztec. Like any type of newsroom, you know, it's a microcosm of a bigger thing. So yeah, I feel like I owe everything to the Daily Aztec.
I remember when I first started at the Daily Aztec, as I was a freshman or sophomore, and some of the older students would tell me, because I worked in sports, and they said, interview the players. They're like, we're a student newspaper. We're students. Interview the players. You know, only interview the coach if you absolutely have to. Like, don't worry about interviewing adults. Like, just focus on students. And I love that perspective that they gave. And I noticed on your LinkedIn that you did a story about the show, the student section at basketball games. Tell me about interviewing fellow students, the show, and what that story was all about.
Yeah, well, like I said, I wanted to try and do stories on subcultures on campus. And we did an episode on the marching band, and we did one on the food services. So I went like behind the scenes on how we eat on campus and all of that. And then it just felt obvious to try and do the show. If there's one thing that's popular about SDSU, it's the student section. And so, yeah, I reached out to the organizers, or to those slightly insane students involved in the show at the front who keep this thing going. And we did it. It kind of came together last minute, and it was rushed, like stories always are. But it worked out in the end. It was great. There were, you know, you had to jump through hoops, because you always have to jump through hoops whenever you're doing some sort of story, rights and filming, but you figure it out. Like I said, it's perfect training for your career, is doing stuff with your student newspaper. And yeah, I just remember, it feels like so long ago, but I remember they let me lead the chant. I think they let me lead the chant. I did the "I believe that we will win" chant. How cool is that? Like amazing. I stood at the front and I did it.
That's also stressful.
Yeah, it was, but you know, no time to stress. You got to do it. You got to do it for the content, for the story. But no, it was fun. And I'm really glad we were able to do that story, because if I remember correctly, I think some things kept falling through. And it was the end of the year. And I think I had had that idea for a while and it worked out. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Tell us about transitioning from student journalist to full-time journalist. What are the different steps that you took, internships that you took, contacts that you made? What fell into your lap? What breaks did you make for yourself in order to start working and getting paid for it?
San Diego is a smaller media market. And so it is, I think, challenging to find internships that can somewhat fit your interests. You kind of have to make some sacrifices, or you want to take all the experience you can. And so I was able to get an internship with the San Diego Union Tribune with the video team. And this was worked out with the advisor and the UT. They kind of made this internship. I worked with the video team, and it was there where I truly learned everything about video. I learned how to edit. I got over my fears of editing. I still am very intimidated by editing, but it's such an important skill for young journalists, I think, is to be able to edit, to self-edit. And in that team, I was the video intern. I'd get there and they'd go, Cami, there's a vaccine clinic, go. And I'd get on the Lime scooter and because it was downtown, and then I rushed downtown and I'd film some things and I'd interview people, and then I'd come back and I'd edit it and I'd whip it up, and I had to be out at 2. And so it was higher stakes video producing. I was that person who had to do everything. I was on the tight deadlines. I worked so closely with Alejandro Tamayo, who is an incredibly talented video journalist who has been at the San Diego Union Tribune for a while. And it was like, I was so lucky to have that man sitting next to me where I could tap on his shoulder and go, sorry, how do I export it again? Or, hey, sorry, real quick, where's the transition? And I think that's all we could hope for, is to work next to somebody we don't mind annoying a little bit, because that's truly the only way you learn. And so, yeah, that was, I think, the big internship that kind of changed everything. I profiled the Sandcastle Man in Coronado Island. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that guy who builds incredible sandcastles. I used this internship to, again, try and pursue those profiles of people that I wanted to try and tell more stories about in my career. I was also able to get a lot of guidance on my thesis video. It was really great. That internship was awesome because it was super adaptable, and it helped me in what I needed to learn. And then you graduate and you're in the big bad world. And 6 months later, you're like, oh my God, I have to pay back my loans. And so it was a few months of me kind of scrambling. I was working at a grocery store. I worked at a law firm as their media specialist. Sometimes you take what you can. And then I got a call one day from Lauren Flynn, who I worked with at the San Diego Union Tribune. And she goes, hey, so the LA Times is starting this new television show, and the Union Tribune is the sister paper of the LA Times. A lot of us from the video team are now at the LA Times. Do you want a job? And I took this call. I was literally sitting outside of Sprouts Farmers Market in Pacific Beach. And I was like, yeah, for sure. I'll take a job at the LA Times. Sure. She goes, okay, can you get here in 2 weeks? I was like, absolutely. I can get here in 2 weeks. Quit the job, figured it out, commuted for a while, eventually found a place. And so that was just like this whirlwind of, oh my God, I just got a job at the LA Times. I got a job at this big paper. Yeah. So I guess all that to say is you make connections everywhere you go. I think we all have networks that are far bigger than what we realize. And yeah, it's all about, I think, just making a good first impression, being yourself, being personable, and you never know who's going to call you one day.
Let's talk more about the job at the LA Times. How much were stories assigned to you? How often would you just say, hey, I've got this idea, and they're like, great, go do it. Tell us about just how stories came about, and maybe any stories that stand out to you for a certain reason.
Yeah, so at the LA Times, I was definitely like a cog in the machine. And I say that in a very kind way, in that I was hired on as kind of an assistant editor producer hybrid position. I was asset person. And so if you work in video, I think you understand how important assets are. The person who has to go and find the stuff you see, You have to find the videos and the clips and the archive, and you're cutting and you're clipping. And it's a grind, but it's such an important job to have. And it's such an important skill to be able to find assets, organize files, send them off to editors. It's not very sexy, but like every media organization has a job like that. So that's what I was doing. And this show I worked on, it was called LA Times Today. So I was kind of in this weird little niche of the LA Times. And what they did is they took articles from the LA Times and then they produced them into broadcast news segments for Spectrum. So it was this interesting kind of collaboration. And for most of the time, I was editing and I was writing the headline segment, for example. So I was working a lot of skills. I was editing, I was writing. And then eventually, like, I still had these documentary aspirations in mind. And I wanted to try and keep pivoting over to my aspirations. I started pitching segments. Sometimes they didn't have producers to do segments. And I went, I'll do it. I'll do the Area 51 raid. Sure, for sure. I'll do that one. And the Hot Cheeto ranking segment. Yeah, I'll do that segment that nobody wants to do. That doesn't seem really great, but I'll do it. I'll do it. And so, so I was able to pitch some stories, to pitch segment ideas that, it was at this job where I really fell in love with archival visuals. And I helped create this archival visual segment that would come on a few episodes a week. And I pitched this one story about a costume shop in Los Angeles. And I was the host of it as well, which was cool for me to again, practice those kind of on camera skills. And it was this fun story about this incredibly beautiful costume shop, just open all year round, and costume rentals. And it was just kind of this cool little slice of life story. Yeah. So the LA Times, it was great. It was this interesting microcosm of the paper where I met a lot of really amazing people.
If you work for a TV station, the archives are probably pretty vast, right? But when you work for a newspaper that is pivoting to do more video, what type of archives do they have when you're finding these clips, when you're getting these assets? Even for a place like the Los Angeles Times, I would think they would be quite the labyrinth of what do we own? What do we have to ask permission for? What do we have to pay for in order to try to find archival video that you can use?
Mm-hmm. It is, the LA Times has their own photo archive, which is really fun to just play around in and look at photos. And that is, I believe, through UCLA. And that is a organized archive that's easy to pull from because it's the LA Times and there's no loopholes. Same thing with their internal server. They have their own archival base with the photojournalists and all the photos they're taking that I search through, and you get pretty savvy with key terms and this and that. But it does get tricky when you want to pull from social media and from Associated Press and Getty. When you're on a TV show like this, it's a little more straightforward because there's licenses and stuff. But the job after this one is when I was really properly swimming in archive and figuring out laws and licensing and stuff like that, which we can get to. But with the LA Times, when it came to archive, it was pretty streamlined. It wasn't too complicated.
All right, we can get to that next job now, unless there's anything else from the LA Times that I forgot to leave out that you think is pertinent for this conversation.
When you're starting out in your career, you never really know what a job is going to be, and you don't really understand what skills become useful. And so on paper, this job, a lot of it was just kind of checking off tasks throughout the day. But the skills I learned to organize files and naming conventions on photos, like these things truly make or break a production sometimes. And so I think it just allowed me to really be open the duties of a job and what you do. It was a really great first job out of college.
Johnny Harris is an independent journalist. He investigates global stories. Mm-hmm. What else do we need to know about who Johnny Harris is and how he has amassed this following of 4.9 million subscribers on the YouTube?
Johnny Harris is a journalist that worked for Vox, VOX Vox, and their whole thing was explainer videos. And I think they really kind of revolutionized digital journalism. They explain complicated topics in very digestible ways, and they use really beautiful motion graphics to do it. And so Johnny gained notoriety on Vox. He had this border series where he went to border regions and examined conflicts, and he was just a really fantastic storyteller. He went independent and he started his own YouTube channel. And at the time that he did that, I was about 2 years into to LA Times, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to pivot again. Let's pivot again toward the stories I want to tell, toward documentary. And Johnny posted on his Instagram story that he was looking for a producer to help research. And I went, oh my God, this is it. This is my sign. I have to pivot now. So I applied and I got it. Then I was with Johnny. And so it was this really cool thing where you look up to somebody and then that somebody is your everyday boss. I don't know. It just, people are people. It was just like this really cool full circle moment. So then I started working with Johnny. I was the second full-time employee he had on his team. By the time I left his channel, it almost tripled the amount of people he had on his team. So I got in really early on and really helped grow his channel, create a workflow between people. And so with Johnny's channel, I was a researcher. He would say, Cami, I've been really thinking about milk. And why did my mom make me drink 4 glasses of milk a day? And I'd go, I don't know, Johnny, but I'll find out. And then I go into my little rabbit hole and I research and I find out what's the deal with milk. And then, it turns out it's this kind of like government thing. And then there was all this milk propaganda posters, and then the war changed it. And then they had to promote dairy and this and that. And in the 90s, there was this big pop culture phenomenon called Got Milk. And so, and then I would take all this information that I learned that was history and geopolitics and pop culture and synthesize it and organize it and then write a script in Johnny's tone and his style. And then we made this explainer video that explains why do we drink milk so much. And through that is when, I was even more in depth with archival videos, and I was fact checking and I was calling expert sources. And so that was really cool and really, really helpful in being a journalist, in taking a simple question and then answering it through some complex, complicated way.
I love deep dives. I love going down rabbit holes. I also hate it when I start to go down one rabbit hole and that sends me down another and another and another. And the number of times that I've
That was my job. That was my job. Oh my God, it was so hard.
The number of times I've gone on newspapers.com to look up one thing and then I come back with like, oh, hey, I found this story about my uncle. Let me send it to him, because
yes,
just where different things take you. And so I realize that there is no exact answer for this, but what were some of the things that you do in order to stay focused down these rabbit holes so that you are finding what you need to find and being efficient while also exploring all the different paths that you might go?
that's a good question. And it's hard. And I think it depends on who you're working for or what the story is. I think part of my job as a story producer, when I'd go on these research deep dives, was building these things that we called infodocs. And I would make buckets of information. And so, let's say the topic was bananas. So I'm thinking of a story I actually did. So the story was about bananas. Okay. And so I would find out here's all this information about monoculture and bananas and diseases they face. But then there's also all this information about geopolitics and Teddy Roosevelt and this and this and that. What I would do is then I would organize these buckets, and we would have a meeting, and we would say, okay, after looking at where all of this stuff goes, this is the most compelling direction. And so I think rather than shutting down some of the holes you fall into, it's more so about organizing your research holes. And then at the end, when you can take a breath and you can look at it from 10 feet above, you can see well, this is the most interesting thing. Or, this has been covered a lot, but this aspect hasn't been covered a lot. Or maybe it's your preference. Maybe it's, I personally am really interested in this one thing. And then kind of see where you go from there.
Before I forget, you mentioned that Johnny posted on his story that he was hiring and you applied for it and you got it. I was thinking about the quantity of people who must have thought the same thing as you. Oh my God, this is it. This is the thing. This is what it was meant to be for me. How did you stand out? Was there something special that you did in your cover letter, in your resume to try to stand out amongst the what I would think would be hundreds of people applying for this job?
Well, to the credit of JMS, I think it was my journalism background. This man and this YouTube channel, they were looking for someone who had worked in journalism. They were looking for someone who could write, who could assess information, who could condense. That's what he needed. And that's what I had. And I think I also had this eagerness to be a sponge and to soak up as much information as I can. I had a desire to explore different sides of storytelling. So it was truly right place, right time. I can tell you right now, I've applied to hundreds of jobs in the past month where I thought, this is it again. And then I don't get it. So like it's talent, it's luck, it's timing, it's a million different reasons as to why sometimes you get that call or you don't get that call.
Well, one assignment that you did get was on Hustlers, Gamblers, and Crooks from a company called Ping Pong Production. Tell us about working on Hustlers, Gamblers, Crooks.
Yeah, isn't that a fun title?
It is. I got to make sure that I say it slowly so that I don't get tongue-tied there.
Yeah. So last summer, I went freelance. I joined the big bad world freelance. Because again, I was trying to pivot. I said, okay, well, I've learned so much in this explainer side of YouTube. But I want to try and work in a documentary series or a film. Like, let's try to pivot that way. And so I saw this job posting. It was from a site called Staff Me Up, which if anyone is trying to find a job in television or film, Staff Me Up is, you got to be on Staff Me Up. I will say it can be very challenging right now because there is a lot of people looking for jobs, but there's a lot of postings there. So yeah, there's this posting for Staff Me Up and they said, we're looking for a documentary series. And I went, oh, I'm going to apply documentary series. That works for me. And I got the call. And the reason I was hired, my boss tells me, it was because, again, I had that journalism background. I think reality TV and television and film, I think it's given me a little bit of an edge. I have this kind of unique background. I have this set of ethics that other people might not have. And at least for the past 2 big jobs I've had, that's what's really helped me get a job was my JMS background. But yeah, so this show was a documentary series for Discovery Channel, and it's real life stories in the gambling world. Big, crazy stories, big wins, big losses, crazy nights. And so as an associate producer on that show, I had to help find these people. I had to find these stories. I had to cast people. And then once that was done, which was very challenging, we filmed the interviews and I was taking notes and arranging travel. And then the fun part that I never had experience in, and now I feel like, I'm an expert because of how much work it was we filmed recreations. So I was auditioning and casting actors. I never thought as like a journalism student, I'd be auditioning actors. But here I was, and I really enjoyed doing it. So I cast actors. I was scouting locations and booking locations, and I was on a film shoot. So it was this really, really cool experience of a little bit of what I was used to, which was outreach, finding people, finding stories, talking to people, and then this whole new avenue of filming a recreation shoot. And so, yeah, it's on Max right now. It's streaming on Max. And the last episode is next Friday, or this Friday is episode 6. And then season 1, just like that, on TV. And you might even see me in some of the episodes. Sorry to say, I had to do a little acting myself.
So, one of my favorite parts about documentaries is just the setup when you're interviewing some of the main people. And I love when documentaries show like kind of the behind the scenes, maybe even there's like this new style where people like walk onto the set and they like sit down in the chair and it's this wide
Yeah.
shot of the lights and all that kind of stuff. And so much for me about documentaries is it's just the look, it's the feel, it's the background, it's, the saturation of the color. And so I don't know how much you were involved in that, but just tell me about being a part of what you're trying to convey simply through just what an interview looks like.
Yeah, I think on this show specifically, I wasn't involved in those conversations, but being that it was a small crew, you get to know the DPs very closely and you get to ask them questions and you get to hear how their brain works and you get to chat with the executive producer and the showrunner to see what their vision is. And so I think, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, a documentary, you have the space to be creative and to try and evoke feelings by the mood and the vibe of a piece. With this show, which was kind of unique and it's a sign of the times, they used AI backgrounds for these interviews. And what was really cool, and the DPs got so giddy about it, is they made these AI backgrounds and they would match the lighting with the AI background. If there was a window over here, they put the light to kind of match it to the real world. This show had a lower budget, and so you have to be really creative in how you shoot things and how you want your backgrounds and your interviews and how many actors you can cast. And so I think a creative way to shoot these interviews was with those AI backgrounds and with the lighting and all of that.
I'm big on always just thinking of ideas, story ideas, different things like that. As we start to wrap things up, let's manifest. What is your dream type of documentary? Let's throw it out into the universe of an idea that you have or the type of thing that you want to do at some point in your career, Cami.
Oh, man. Well, I think the types of documentaries that I look up to are like the Chef's Tables, that series on Netflix called Chef's Table. It's Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown. I dream of working on a series like that. It's the mix of travel and culture with profiles, with food, with history, and done in like an artful way. That's the dream to me, is to work on a show like that. It less so a story topic, but more so the intention, the authenticity. I think I just crave authenticity when it comes to storytelling. There's so much out there that you can tell as a viewer is not very genuine. You can tell the people being interviewed aren't comfortable with the people behind the camera. You can tell it was maybe a churn and burn type of documentary that they just, wanted to get a profit. I would really love to work on something with people who genuinely care about the story, because truly that makes all the difference in the world when you watch it, I think.
When it comes to the life of a freelancer, and we had Jamie Ballard on the podcast about a year or so ago, and she recently took the dive into the freelance world. And I was talking to her from a writing standpoint about what it's like being a freelancer and the good weeks and the good months versus the bad months. What type of advice can you give to me, to students, to anyone listening about kind of the highs and the lows of the freelance world when it comes to finding that next assignment, even maybe while you're working on one assignment?
Yeah, there's a lot to say. And a lot of my advice is what I have to keep reminding myself every day. I am also new to freelance and I am figuring it out. Right now, I am at a stretch where I have not been working for a while. And that gets to you, whether you're freelance or whether you were laid off. I think when you are not working, it's very easy to just kind of spiral and get in your head. But I'd say, like, logistically, if you're in between jobs, get out of the house. Go apply for jobs at a cafe. Give yourself something to do. Keep busy during this time. Tap that network. Tap that network. Don't assume someone's response before reaching out, because that's what I find myself doing. I go, oh, well, I saw that guy posted on Instagram that he also just got laid off. I shouldn't reach out. You never know who people know. And we're all in this together. There is no judgment, I think, when someone reaches out asking for help or advice or connections. And I think piece of advice, maybe not so much for freelance, but just in general, as you navigate finding a job, is just make stuff, make stuff, make stuff, make stuff. I have to keep reminding myself to just make stuff and to not judge the work I haven't even done yet. There's this Ira Glass quote where he talks about the gap. And it's when you're creative, you have great taste when you're a creative. But when you're starting out, your skill does not yet match that taste. And so as you go through this gap of making really bad stuff, it's really discouraging because you have great taste and you know you can make something great, but you're just not there yet. And so you have to just push through that gap of not having the skills and the knowledge and just make things. If you have an idea, do it. Send the email, make that phone call, watch that YouTube video to figure out what S-Log is and how to export 4K for Instagram. It's the nitty-gritty stuff that might get you down, but just do it, just make it.
I want to follow up on what you just said because I remember when I got laid off and I didn't want to tell people, like I wasn't embarrassed or ashamed, but I just didn't want pity. I didn't want people to do like that head tilt, and
yeah.
And what I tell people now is tell the world, I'm available for work. Go have a bunch of lunches with people that because if they are going to feel pity, then they'll pay for the lunch. And so that's always good.
Yeah.
And I remember that there was a number of people would say like, oh, Josh, I'm not worried about you. You'll find something. And I go, well, thanks for the confidence. But if you hear about something, tell me.
Yep. Yeah.
So don't just assume that I'm going to find something. And so continue to remind people, which is something that I know that feels awkward to me. But
yes.
I remember there was a friend of mine who was also had been laid off at the same time. And was like, all right, let's go hiking together and get some sunshine. And let's just brainstorm ideas. Let's just brainstorm different jobs or different things like that. And how much that's just helpful and cathartic when you're just thinking of ideas and just talking to somebody, outdoors as you get some exercise.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful is talking to people, getting out there. If you have a hobby, do that hobby. I used to do improv comedy a lot and I have these goofy friends and I have all these comedy sketch ideas. And when I meet with these friends and I think of these sketch ideas, it makes me feel so much better to just get my brain moving. And yeah, a comedy sketch isn't going to land me a documentary job, but it might. The gears are turning and one thing will lead to another. So it's just keep busy in this time when you're not working. Don't be ashamed if you were laid off. I've been laid off. It's okay. It happens to so many people. It's not a sign of your abilities. I Googled, who else has been laid off? Oprah was laid off. There was someone else. I forget, but it's it's all good. It'll be okay.
Before I forget, what are some of your tricks or tips when it comes to taking a small sliver of something and posting that on social media or wherever to try to entice somebody to watch the whole thing? In case, for example, it's a podcast about journalism or something like that.
Yeah, this is such an important skill. It sounds so boring, but truly the ability to watch something long and to find an entertaining tidbit is so unbelievably helpful in media. I think the ability to kind of train your brain and your ears to find something intriguing is just incredibly helpful and useful. And being able to listen to a podcast and take a little bit of it for Instagram is a skill that translates to going through 4 hours of archive footage and trying to find that one interesting clip, for the edit. That ability to clip something small is incredibly beneficial in the long run. It seems like not an important thing to do, but it really is. And if you're good at doing that, it's very, very helpful.
Before we wrap things up, anything else that I should have asked you that I did not ask you? I want to kind of give you the floor here at the end for any pearls of wisdom or just any other thoughts about your journey so far that you think is insightful.
I speak to you now. It sounds so official. I speak to you now, but I speak to you now as someone who's in it with everybody. I feel like I have not made it. I think success is kind of a perception. I think the dream job isn't exactly real. I think we get so caught up in expectations and the fact that we're not doing enough. And I think I have to constantly tell myself, it is not a race. This is not a race. Martha Stewart made her first cookbook at 40 years old. I'd fact check that. I don't know if that's completely true. I read it on Instagram. But if that is true, Martha Stewart made her first cookbook at 40. I am 27 years old. It's fine. Like every job, you learn something, you grow, and you meet people. That's the thing. I've had jobs before where I really didn't enjoy it at all. And I didn't think it necessarily put me to where I aspired to be. But I met the best people who were connected, who were kind, who were patient, and who taught me so much. So just settle down, kids, is what I say. It is not a race, truly. And I have to say that to myself. I have to tell myself, I'm 27. It's okay. It will all work out in the end.
I like that advice a lot. All right, let's wrap things up. We like to brag about other San Diego State alums who are making us proud and whatever it is that they're doing that makes us proud. So Cami, who do you want to brag about this week?
So many people to brag about. Many have already been bragged about on this podcast because, like I said, the Daily Aztec family is so tight and we were all so cool. When you're up until midnight, stressed over a paper that 5 people read, it really bonds you. You know what I mean? But I think some other people I can shout out that haven't been mentioned before are Lauren Flynn, who gave me my first job. She's the post-production supervisor at the LA Times. She's incredibly talented. She's a wonderful person. And the LA Times just had massive unexpected layoffs. And she is still at the LA Times, but has had to take on so much stress, so much work. And it's a thing that a lot of us in media have had to deal with before, is wearing a lot of hats, doing a lot of things and picking up the slack. So she's incredible for what she does. Anna Let's-Go, who I shared that goofy radio show with, she's a JMS alum. She was in the PR side, and she's taken a really interesting path in media. She is a great person to talk to for your graduate degree. She got her master's in gender and media studies, and she's a researcher and a cultural analyst where she works now. And so she is kind of researching cultural trends and topics. And it's a really unique side of media that I think a lot of us don't know a lot about. And lastly, Jessica Tran graduated with me. We both did the film minor together at SDSU, and she was also a PR major. She works for HBO. She's a talent coordinator, and she's killing it. She loves her job. She's at these really cool events, and she loves television, and it's really great to see her shine in what she's doing and to work in a place that she always admired so much.
Like all 3 of those. Those are excellent. I'm taking notes to add them to my master spreadsheet of future potential guests. There's 2 people that I want to highlight for my turn. Russell Carpenter attended San Diego State, I believe it was the late 60s, early 70s. He won an Academy Award as the director of cinematography for the movie Titanic, and he has been a titan in the world of cinematography. Again, Russell Carpenter from way back in the day at San Diego State. And also for people who really enjoy documentaries like Cami and I, we had a guest, episode 21, Chidozie Ononuwu. And Chidozie has done fantastic work with ESPN and their 30 for 30. And he's done a lot of other just like 10 to 20 minute feature productions that he's done in the world of sports. That's the #1 downloaded podcast from the Where You At podcast is Chidozie's episode. It really resonated with a lot of people, or the right people sent it out into the world because it is by far the runaway most downloaded and listened to. Chidozie's awesome. And so I wanted to highlight those 2 people as well, since they're somewhat within the same field as Cami.
Amazing.
All right, Cami, thank you so much for your time and for your stories and for your perspective. I'm glad that we have manifesting your dream to get it out there. And I look forward to the time that we take the clip of you saying that this is what I would absolutely love to do. And then there's that little thing that says 5 years later or however many years later, and we see you doing that exact thing.
Oh man, I'm excited for that day too. I know it's going to come. I do. I feel it in my bones. I'll get there. I'm excited.
All right. Once again, Cami, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Cami Buckman. My name is Josh Suchon. This is the Where You At podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs.